Let's talk about poop. Have you ever thought about putting a composting toilet in your van? Well, today we're going to talk with a guy who's lived with one in a small boat for 10 years, and he's going to answer the most important question.
Does it smell?
He's going to share with us his tips and tricks on how to make it work.
What you do not want to do is to use something like cat litter. The key to all composting toilets is
And he's going to share the dirty little secret that nobody wants to talk about with composting toilets.
because there's not a lot of composting that really takes place in these small toilets.
I'm John from Whitewater of Hands. Stay tuned and let's talk toilets. I'm here today with Dr. Don Lwell to talk about composting toilets. The reason we're talking with Don is because he's lived for, a decade or so off-grid with a composting toilet. And he wrote a book on his journey and how it came to be and how you can do it yourself. So the book is called The Floating Empire Composting Toilet Book, Building Your Own DIY Composting Toilet with Urine Diverter from Simple Materials. You can find it on Amazon. It's a Kindle ebook. You can download it. Don, welcome. I'm glad to have you here today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got on this journey of having a composting toilet in this little abode of yours.
Mm-hmm. I've been around boats my whole life, so I was really familiar with marine blackwater, they're called, systems, and they're awful. They always leak. You have to have them pumped out. They leak. And fixing a sewage line in a pump in the water in a small cabinet space while you're at sea is like the third ring of hell. Right. So we decided not to go that way and looked into various versions of composting toilets, dry toilets, as a way of avoiding having to deal with that.
Tell me a little bit about your composting toilet system. Like, what's it made of, and how do you use it on a daily basis? Like, what's a daily life look like with this composting toilet?
There's nothing really to deal with the composting toilet. The key to all composting toilets is urine diversion. Because if you get a lot of liquid in there, you get anaerobic decomposition, which gives you that sewer sulfur hydroxide smell that we all connect with sewage.
Right.
As long as you keep the solid mass and the liquid stuff separate, you don't get that. Okay. So the constant question is, does it smell?
Right.
No, never. And the blackwater systems that dump both of that together, usually in a bag or a tank, always smell because they're always going through that anaerobic decomposition.
Oh, okay.
This is going through aerobic decomposition, which is what happens on a forest floor. Mm-hmm. So basically it's turning into mulch.
Yeah.
So that's not an unpleasant odor if you get any odor at all.
Okay.
Day to day, the only thing you have to do is periodically dump in some material to absorb the moisture and to keep the solid material loose so there's air circulation around it. But that can be coir, it can be sawdust, it can be wood shavings. We found the best thing to use is wood stove pellets.
Okay. Yeah, they're fairly cheap.
They're compressed sawdust. Mm-hmm. They're cheap, and unlike the sawdust, they don't go everywhere. They stay contained until they get wet, and then they expand. Okay. So that's been the easiest thing. It's about $6 for a 40-pound bag.
Yeah,
and that will last you for months.
I've had folks commenting on my other Van Toilet Showdown book. That they often use horse bedding, which I think is the same sort of thing. It's compressed sawdust. Yeah. And it's about the same price. So you can find this material in a few different places, either feed stores or I can get the sawdust pellets at Home Depot or any big box store.
Home Depot, Lowe's, any of those. Right. And in summer, when it's hard to find them, smokers, they're wood pellet burning smokers that use a food grade wood pellet that can also work in this. It's more expensive, but again, you're not using a lot of it. So
yeah. So do you typically just put like a cup of it over the material when you use the toilet?
Just a handful of it over the top of the material.
Yeah.
and it will absorb. It'll absorb the moisture, and the next time you look at it, there'll just be a bed of, it looks like wet sawdust.
Yeah, yeah. And then I noticed that many of the composting toilets on the market, they have agitators to help sort of stir in the material. And I would imagine in a real composting sense, when you're trying to circulate that oxygen through the material, that could be helpful. Have you tried agitators? Do you notice any difference with that?
We don't use one in this system,
Mm-hmm.
because one of the limitations of all of these composting toilet systems is the size of the vessel which is containing the material. To some extent, composting toilet systems is a misnomer, because there's not a lot of composting that really takes place in these small toilets. They're too small.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first stage in a set of composting steps.
Well, and
I mentioned
composting takes a while as well. It can take months
it
for the
does. It
material to
takes
actually break down.
anywhere between 6 months and a year. What you're doing mostly in composting toilet systems in homes and vans and boats is separating the urine and the solid material, so they can be disposed of separately.
Okay.
And the liquid waste, the urine, it's nitrogen heavy. So if you dilute it, and you can put it on shrubs and trees and plants and your lawn, because the plants will love the additional nitrogen.
So I want to come back to one of the things that you mentioned here, like because it is a small system and the material, it's not sitting in there for many months. How frequently do you find that like a bucket system needs to be emptied?
Well, for ease of use, the system that we put together is based on a 5-gallon bucket,
Uh-huh.
because those are easy to get. And typically, you're going to wind up dumping the solid material every week to 10 days, depending on how much you're in the space,
Yeah, yeah.
and how many people are in the space, etc., and what they're eating.
Right.
And the urine diverter depends on how large the urine diverter vessel is, and typically you're going to dump that every couple of days,
Okay.
just to be safe. Now, there are smaller systems that you may have to dump more frequently,
Yeah.
but and all of these, the urine diversion is the key part of this, because that's what keeps this from reeking and allows you to have a dry mass that you can then dispose of.
Uh-huh. Have you used any like little perfumes or anything, the little sprays like you would normally see in a bathroom? Candles?
No, not really. It hasn't been
Don't really need
necessary.
it. Yeah.
It hasn't been necessary. And now a lot of these systems have a small vent fan
Mm-hmm.
to exhaust the area, which isn't bad. I mean, we have a porthole next to the
In the bathroom.
toilet area here. But by and large, these systems do not smell.
Right.
And you're gonna, when you first use it, like with any other toilet, you may notice something, but that's going to dissipate really quickly.
Yeah, yeah. Now, we talked just a moment ago about sort of the different materials that you could put in, and sawdust is one of the cheaper, better ones. What are some of the other materials you've tried, and maybe some pros and cons of those?
We've used sawdust when it
Mm-hmm.
was available. Also wood chips, those also work. But if you don't have a good source for those, you're going to wind up paying for it, which sounds kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Coir, which is compressed coconut fiber, which is
Mm-hmm.
used a lot in landscaping and putting together terrariums and stuff like that, works quite well, but it's quite messy.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because it kind of goes everywhere when it's dry, so you wind up wetting it slightly to be able to deal with it. Sphagnum moss works,
Mm-hmm.
but it's hard to obtain on a general basis.
And
And
that
again,
could probably be more
the
expensive.
wood stove pellets, animal bedding, horse bedding, all of that will work. The idea is you want something dry, which is very loose, that can separate the feces, the solid material, and allow air circulation around it and absorb moisture.
Okay.
So anything you've got that'll do that will work. I've used, when we've run out of stuff, crushed up dried leaves work.
Okay.
As long as it was able to absorb moisture and isn't too dense, you're probably fine.
Mm-hmm.
What you do not want to do is to use something like cat litter,
And why
which
is
well, cat litter is clay.
that? Okay.
And what it does is it absorbs the moisture, but then it turns into a rock
Hmm.
and doesn't allow any air circulation. So eventually you're going to get anaerobic decomposition within the cat litter.
Oh,
So
okay.
it
Yeah,
works
that's good to
fine
know.
for a very, very short period of time and the way the cats use it, but
Yeah,
it's not something you want to use in this kind of system.
right.
So I
Interesting.
do like the wood stove pellets because they are contained. And the trouble is, if they do get out and you step on them, it's like stepping on a little tiny Lego.
Right. I wanted to talk a little bit more about your process for emptying it. So often folks will put like bags in there, compost bags, plastic bags, and then just kind of tie up the bag. But in your book, it didn't look like you used that. Tell me a little bit about your process.
There's two ways to approach this. One is when you clean out the bucket and it's damp, you sort of flour the bucket with sawdust so that nothing will stick to the walls of the bucket. And then it can simply be dumped. Now, on the boat, we often will use bags. And I've got some here. These are portable toilet bags. You can get them off of Amazon. And they are made out of cornstarch.
Oh.
So it looks like a plastic, but it isn't. And after about 6 months, it breaks down completely. There's no plastic involved in it.
Okay.
It makes life a lot easier, especially if you're in a situation where you're having to change the thing frequently and to carry it for any distance. The main thing with if you're just dumping the thing, you'll have to have the ability to clean it out regularly.
Tell us a little bit about your urine diversion system. Do you have a jug that goes inside the bucket? Does it sit off to the side? How does that work?
Well, here's one of the systems that was off of another boat. I've built them for a couple of boats around us.
Okay.
And if you look at the bottom here, you can see this is the diverter, which is just a wedge cut bottom of a 5-gallon bucket.
Okay.
And what you've got is a little angle thing, and here is a hose, and the urine comes out of the hose and is in a container typically that sits next to the bucket, so that the container can be of any size.
Okay.
If you were in a
hose does it go? Is there a hole in the side of the bucket the hose comes out through, or?
You can do that. I have set this down into the bucket and cut a notch for it.
I see.
Also, if you've got a solid surface on which this is sitting, and then the bucket is just sitting below it, this can come out through the side of this.
Okay.
It's just whichever way is convenient to route it. I
So
do recommend
kind of a top. So you've got a bucket that's just the top is cut off that your urine diversion sits on in your toilet seat, and then that sits over the top of your container bucket. Yeah.
Right, and which means that the main container bucket can be anything and of any size.
Right.
And this is just a snap-on lid you can get for camping, which works pretty well. You can see how this is just screwed in to the inside of the rim, and the drain is right there. That's all the urine diversion system has to consist of.
Right.
It takes up about half of the space of the toilet because when you poo, it's toward the back.
Yeah.
And that's the whole system. Periodically, it needs to be flushed out with water. And one thing we learned the hard way is that the larger this hose is, the less likely it is to get stopped up.
Oh.
And what gets it stopped up typically is small amounts of toilet paper that wind up in the diverter. You need 2 buckets. You need about 6 stainless steel screws and the hose set up.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I've reached out to a number of these composting toilet companies, Boxio, Trellino, Ogo, Cuddy. They all have some great models. And I have a number of these toilets that are getting sent to me that I'm going to be sort of doing reviews and tests of each one. So if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel so you get updates and notifications when these new videos come out, and you can see the individual reviews on each toilet, the comparisons of the models that each company has, and then how those compare with each other for the variations of how you might want to use them for van life.
Well, I think the main thing is most of these systems work under the same principles, but they are wildly divergent in construction and cost. do your research before you grab one, because they can vary in size and installation too. So
Yeah, some of the things is probably the most important is like the stability of it, how easy it is to carry around and move, how easy is it to dump and clean and just use it on a regular basis.
and if it doesn't fit in the vehicle that you're trying to apply it to, it's not going to work for you no matter how wonderful the system is.
Right,
So
right. Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much for your time today. Don't forget, we've got a link in the description below to Don's book on Amazon. The title, once again, is The Floating Empire Composting Toilet Book by Don Lwell, Building Your Own Composting Toilet with a Urine Diverter from Simple Materials. It's 99 cents. I highly recommend you pick up a copy, and regardless of what kind of a toilet you want to use, whether or not you're going to build your own or if you're going to buy one that's on the market, it's a great book to have just so that you understand the process of what's going on and sort of the ins and outs and pros and cons of what you should be looking at when you look for your own composting toilet. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the road.